One day, while looking for a part-time job, I saw a recruitment ad that was looking for an assistant for a YouTube channel. The salary was $200 a day. I was excited and applied right away, and asked my friend Matthew to come with me. A few days later, we decided to meet the YouTuber nearby. We got into his car and drove almost 2 hours to an abandoned factory in some remote area. When we arrived, there were other people there as well. They also came for the recruitment, and there were about 4 of them, and we exchanged greetings with one another. A moment later, the YouTuber walked over wearing a mask and holding axes in each hand. We watched him nervously, and he introduced himself as a YouTuber who shoots horror videos. He showed us his channel, but the number of subscribers was very low, less than 100. I wanted to know what this was all about, but I thought he was a person with a lot of money and just ignored it. But I should have noticed. He set up the camera and started explaining to us.
I'm an axe murderer, and you guys will be murdered by me today. Don't touch your phone once the shooting starts. Don't go outside.
Suddenly, the tone of his voice turned cold, and I got goosebumps. He said,
"Now the night of the death begins."
Immediately, he came running at breakneck speed and began slashing down a man frantically with an axe. The man shouted,
"Ah! I was really hit! This is a real axe!"
Blood splattered with a thud, and an ear-splitting scream shook the building. At that moment, my legs felt weak and almost fell down, and the screaming sound of others was ear-shattering. While I was shaking, Matthew, who was next to me, said,
"Hey, we're done."
People ran to the entrance of the abandoned factory and tried to open the door, but it was locked. People knocked on the door frantically asking for help, but no one was around. People took out their cell phones and tried to call the police, but every time they did, the man knocked them down with his axe. I started racking my brain like crazy. I had never been so focused in my life. If this continues, everyone in here will die within 10 minutes. In the end, there was only one way. It was to steal the man's axe. I said quietly to Matthew,
"If we take the axe, then we win."
Matthew cried,
"Our heads will be split in 2 first."
Looking at Matthew, I said,
"Even if we stay still, we will die anyway. The 2 of us, let's seize his hands at the same time."
In the meantime, the psycho was knocking down people with his axe in a flash. Several people were bleeding and moaning on the floor. At that time, a man attacked the psycho, and the 2 started fighting. At that moment, I told Matthew,
"Hold his left hand."
Matthew and I ran frantically and grabbed the psycho's hands. Then he struggled like mad, and I managed to snatch away one axe from his hand. But Matthew missed his hand, and the psycho raised his axe and hit Matthew.
"Ah!"
Matthew's scream infuriated me, and I slammed the psycho's back with all my might with the axe. He groaned and fell to the floor. I continued to hit him with the axe with all my might, and he fell, bleeding, and never got up again. I gasped for breath and called the police, and when the police arrived shortly after, the scene was horrendous. 2 people died, and 2 were seriously injured. Matthew was seriously injured, and they were all taken away by an ambulance. The psycho was dead. The police checked on the camera he was filming, which vividly recorded scenes of people being murdered by an axe. The police were in great shock. I searched for his YouTube channel that the psycho had told me about. There were about 3 videos uploaded, but all of them were videos of him attacking many people with an axe. In the video, he was running with an axe, chasing people. Then the screen went black, only the dull sound of the axe hitting and people screaming. Then, at the end, the man appeared on the screen again, holding an axe stained with blood.
If you're curious about the actual video, click on the link in the description. You can see the actual murder scene for $100.
And I could see people lying down far away. When I entered the link, a strange website appeared with a number of actual videos uploaded. I informed the police about this, and they began to search for additional victims. I don't know what happened after that. Much time has passed, and Matthew and I are still friends, but he still shudders when he thinks of that day, and he still has a big scar on his shoulder.
This is the story of my 6-year-old daughter, Riley. She was a good girl, but one day she started acting strangely. One day at dawn, she suddenly looked out the window and started howling like a wolf. When I asked why, she said that there was a wolf spirit outside and she was talking with the wolf. "Mom, the wolf says that our house is where dead souls gather." I got goosebumps, but I just passed it over, thinking it wouldn't be a big deal. But even after that, this same thing happened again and again. Suddenly, she looked into the air and talked to someone, drew a strange-looking monster on her notebook, and said it was her friend. The monster was a very terrifying creature with 6 eyes and 6 limbs that looked as if 3 humans were combined together. And it possibly could not have been drawn by a 6-year-old. I tried to scold her, and I tried to talk her out of it, but she never got better. One day, on my way to work, I told her that I would be coming in late because I need to work overtime. Then she said, "Mom, I have so many friends at home, so I'm not lonely." I ended up taking her to a psychiatrist, but even the doctor couldn't figure out exactly why she was behaving like this. Then one day, she suddenly handed me some bread and asked me to eat it. The moment I picked up the bread and put it in my mouth, I recognized that something red was all over the bread. I asked in surprise, "Sweetie, what is this?" She said, "It's hamster blood. Kevin told me to give it to you." My heart sank, and I looked at the hamster cage in her room and found that the hamster was dead. I was so shocked and angry, so I grabbed her and yelled, "Who is Kevin? Why are you doing this?" I yelled at the top of my lungs, and she pointed to the wall next to me and said, "That's Kevin. His jaw is down to the ground and his mouth is 5 feet wide. He's looking at you and drooling, and his saliva is like jelly. And Kevin's mouth is full of dead animals and dead people because he can't digest anything since he has no organs. He says he wants to eat you too." I got goosebumps, grabbed her hand, and ran out of the house right away. Then I got in the car and sped like crazy until I got to a Catholic church in the neighborhood. I frantically searched for the priest and explained everything without hesitation. Then the priest thought for a moment and said, "Your daughter has made friends with sinister spirits. Your daughter won't get hurt, but the people around her will be in danger. I will say my prayers for Riley." The priest held her and prayed the rosary for a long time, and she mocked the prayer or shouted it at the priest in an unknown language. I was really embarrassed and couldn't believe all this, but there was no other way, so I continued to visit the priest after that. After visiting the church dozens of times, surprisingly, Riley gradually came back to normal. She no longer stared into space, talked to herself, or did anything strange. I was so happy, and now my family could live a normal life. I didn't go to the church anymore, and after a few months like that, one day, Riley looked into the air again and shouted, "Mom, the priest is here!" I was surprised and asked her, "The priest? Why is he here?" Then Riley pointed into the air, and there was nothing she was pointing at, and she said with a bright smile, "Here he is in Kevin's mouth."
Every summer, my best friend, whom we'll call Maria, and I hung out at this resort. We each had our own hotel room that we shared together. One night, when we were 11 years old, Maria suggested that we go ghost hunting. I didn't have a great feeling about it, so I said, "I don't really think we should go. Let's just stay inside and play games." But Maria insisted, saying, "Oh, come on, it'll be fun. I'll play with you every day this summer if you go with me." Stupidly, I agreed. And we put our clothes, grabbed flashlights, and all that stuff. We went to the convenience shop in the resort to get a few sodas, and then that's when I saw her. Behind the register stood the most terrifying woman I had ever seen. My face went pale, and then she disappeared. As we were walking out, Maria noticed my pale face and asked, "Why?" I told her everything, expecting her to be concerned, but to my surprise, she seemed happy. At that moment, I thought, what's wrong with this idiot? Nevertheless, she dragged me to the lobby to investigate. While I sat in the seat, already traumatized by the incident in the convenience store. As I was getting my phone from my purse, I noticed a red stain on my sundress. I thought it was ketchup from the buffet we had, so I shook it off. A few minutes later, I heard the most blood-curdling scream coming from the elevator. I don't think anyone else heard it since there was no one else around. and the night shift employee was fast asleep. It sounded like it was coming from the elevator hall. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out. The screaming grew louder and louder, causing my eardrums to feel like they were bleeding. I opened one of the doors and found a musty-looking man in his 40s, holding a knife to Maria's throat. In a panic, he grabbed me and whispered, "I have a thing for Japanese girls." I'm actually Korean, but that didn't matter. I bit him and kicked his crotch, freeing Maria from his grip. We quickly ran back to our room and called the resort security. Thankfully, the man was arrested, but we were left absolutely traumatized. I'm now 13, and I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't heard Maria or found the right elevator.
It was a stormy night and it was heavily raining. I was returning home on my scooter when I heard people behind me shouting, and it seemed like they were stalking me. I could distinctly hear a female, and she sounded close. I tried not to let it bother me at first, but it was impossible. I shot a quick glance behind me, and I was being chased. There was a woman, and she was holding a knife, just a few meters behind me. She menacingly smiled at me, which gave me a jerk, and because of the rainfall, my scooter skidded and I fell down on the wet asphalt. I turned on my flashlight quickly, and my stalker was still pursuing me. She saw my face from the flashlight and seemed alarmed, and then she ran off into the darkness. I scrambled to take a photo, but my shaky hands, filled with panic, mixed with the darkness, only got me a blurry shot of a blue sweater and the knife she was holding. The next day, I told my cousin about what happened. A look of horror came across his face. He told me that a girl had recently asked him out, but he declined, and she didn't take it well. The woman couldn't see my face clearly originally, and maybe that's why she ran after seeing my face finally lit up from the flashlight. What my friend said next shocked me. Apparently this was the 4th incident of her mistakenly chasing someone else. I'm glad I survived that night and got away with only a few scratches. However, I can't stop thinking about the fate of whom she might try to attack next. I am a Chinese international student living in Sydney, Australia. I am studying animation and property investment, and I work hard every day. I remember one summer evening in 2021 when I had finished my report and decided to go for a drive to relax. I drove outside the city and found myself on a road surrounded by a national park up north. It was quite dark, and without the car lights, visibility was poor, creating a somewhat eerie atmosphere. After a few minutes, I began to slow down as the road became more winding due to the mountainous terrain. It was during this time that I noticed a white figure in the middle of the road. Feeling startled, I stopped the car, and feeling a mix of fear and frustration, I exclaimed, "What the hell are you doing here, asshole?" However, upon closer inspection, I realized it was a crying girl in need of help. Not knowing how to handle the situation, especially involving a young girl, I allowed her to enter the car and sit in the passenger seat. She appeared frightened and requested that I drive her somewhere. As I continued driving, I didn't notice anyone behind the car. During the journey, I attempted to communicate with her and asked her where she wanted to go, but she seemed unable to understand or respond in English. She was a Caucasian girl, around 17 years old, dressed in a high school uniform. Despite my attempts to engage in conversation, she remained visibly anxious for about 30 minutes. At some point, she expressed her desire to call her mother, and I handed her my smartphone. However, she spoke in a language unfamiliar to me, which I assumed was her native tongue. For the remainder of the car ride, we did not exchange any more words. I contemplated contacting the police as the circumstances seemed suspicious. It was unusual for a young girl to be out alone at such a late hour. Additionally, I noticed that she was not wearing shoes and did not have a school bag, leading me to believe she may have been kidnapped. I decided to stop at a 24-hour gas station to buy some food for her. Before leaving the car, I quickly glanced inside to ensure she was all right. To my surprise, she was no longer there, leaving only some water or liquid on the left seat of my car. Despite the absence of any other vehicle at the gas station, it was baffling to wonder where she could have gone. I immediately contacted the police, and they thoroughly inspected my car. However, they were unable to provide any answers. Something strange caught my attention while checking my phone. I discovered a phone number. I called the number, hoping to reach the police. To my dismay, a woman on the other end cried and accused me of being a liar, insisting that I shouldn't call back. A week later, I received a phone call from the police with a chilling revelation. They informed me that a Greek immigrant family had lost their daughter, who had been kidnapped and murdered by her boyfriend 30 years ago. Astonishingly, the police mentioned that she was only 17 years old at the time of her death. This left me wondering about the girl I had encountered that night, someone who seemed so real but was apparently connected to a tragic incident from the past. I never saw her again. I had a girlfriend I dated 3 years ago. Her name was Sydney. But one day, she started to be so clingy towards me. She asked me hundreds of times every day if I love her, and I was so tired that I eventually dumped her. She then sent me one text message and moved to a city far away.
Take care, honey. Let's meet in 3 years.
Then she changed her phone number, and like that, I thought I'd never see her again. 3 years have already passed since then, and I was in love with a new woman. I became a recognized employee in my company, and everything was going well. I had completely forgotten about my ex-girlfriend, until the day came. One day, I heard a knock on the door, and when I opened the door, she was standing there. My ex, Sydney. I got goosebumps. How did she find my house? But what terrified me even more was her face. Her jawline was severely reshaped, making it look as if she had no jaw. Her nose was absolutely pointy, as if the implant was going to pierce out of her skin at any moment. Her eyes, forehead, cheeks, and all parts of her face reshaped abnormally. It was just like a scene from a horror movie. The only way I could recognize her was by the tattoo on her neck. It was a tattoo she got in the past that read, "You have to love me." Then she suddenly jumped at me, grabbed me by my neck, and shouted,
How do you like my face? Now do you love me?
Her jaw was crooked, and she seemed to be unable to pronounce words well. She stammered. I was so surprised that I asked her why the hell she is doing this, but she just kept repeating the same thing over and over again.
Now do you love me, or don't you love me?
Finally, I shoved her away and went into the house, and she kept knocking on the door for a long time. I ended up calling the police. It turned out that she had received over 100 illegal plastic surgeries since we broke up. She endlessly asked doctors for ridiculous, strange surgeries, and her face turned grotesque by getting surgery in an illegal way, after all. That's how she continued to come to my house and hover around in front of it. She shouted at me.
Why? Is it still not enough? Should I lift my nose more? Shall I enlarge my eyes more?
She screamed madly. After a while, she left a small note in front of my house, and the note said,
Please come to my place one last time. Then I will leave you forever.
I went to the address she wrote, and there was a small, shabby house. The front door was slightly open, and I peered through the door. Then I saw a silhouette of a woman standing in the living room. I opened the door, thinking it was her, and she shouted,
How do you like me now? Don't you think I'm beautiful? Love me now!
But the woman was not Sydney. It was a Barbie doll the size of a real woman. Sydney held the doll from behind and pretended to be the doll. I was startled, and then I saw that she was holding the doll's hand and holding a knife as well. She shouted as she ran over to me with the doll.
It's not the looks, it's the heart that matters!
She swung the knife at my chest, and I barely managed to escape and ran outside. I ran away like crazy and called the police. Later on, she was arrested by the police, and it turned out that she had been suffering from a very serious mental illness. What was even more shocking was that she had asked the plastic surgeon to transplant her heart into the body of a Barbie doll. When the doctor said no, she said to the doctor,
Then I'll bring you a man. So take out his heart and attach it to mine.
When I was in 12th grade, I joined an a cappella competition with 6 of my friends, 3 girls and 5 boys. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, and our mentor decided that we should go to the music room to practice our vocals since the competition would be the next day. We had been studying in that school for almost 2 years, but we had never entered that room before. As we entered the room, the first thing I noticed was the piano located near the door. It was quite old, as were the other guitars stored in the corner of the room.
Andy, stop staring at the piano. It's an old piano. You won't be able to play it.
He went to the piano and pressed the keys to prove that it wasn't making any sound. I just nodded at him and followed his orders during practice. We all blended so well, following his instructions. An hour later, there was a beep from his phone.
Guys, there's an emergency. I'll just have to go downstairs for a bit. Wait for me, don't touch anything,
he instructed. We all nodded, and he left the room. Sitting on the floor, we started chatting about the strategies we would use for the competition. A few minutes later, my friend Eric said something unrelated.
Damn, I need to pee bad,
and ran towards the door, shouting,
"Don't leave me!"
Before shutting it, we continued chatting and the conversation became more interesting. I didn't even notice when Eric returned to the room. In the middle of our conversation, we all heard the piano playing. I became annoyed, thinking that one of them was playing it.
"Hey, stop it! Sir might kill us,"
I scolded. Then we realized that the piano was broken and hadn't made any sound earlier. We looked at the piano, and it was playing on its own. We were all frozen in place, shaking to our core. I stood behind my other friend, trembling, and we all decided to exit through the door. My friend Eric was panicking so badly that he couldn't open the door at first. My other friend, Trina, took over and quickly opened the door. We ran downstairs to tell our mentor what had happened. "Sir, the piano was playing on its own," I cried. He was in shock and decided to send us home to rest instead of continuing the practice. The next day, we found out that a nun had died in that room, and she was musically inclined. Our mentor joked that she was just trying to help us, but it wasn't a funny experience for us. We hadn't seen a nun playing, but witnessing a piano playing its keys was terrifying.
My name is Kushi Singhal, and I'm a 17-year-old living in Delhi, India. So the story goes like this. This incident happened to me a few months back. One day, I was returning from coaching classes, and as usual, people were crowded on the streets, and the hour of the day was also a busy one, probably 6 in the evening. I was really tired that day, so I decided to book a cab home for myself instead of taking the bus. It was a distance of about 21 miles between my home and class, and it took about 1.5 to 2 hours to reach home. While I was in the cab, suddenly I was shaken a bit and the car stopped just about a mile away from my home, but because it was so dark, it seemed to be a pretty long journey. So I decided to walk home as it was too late to take another vehicle. After walking for a few minutes, I realized that a girl, probably the same age as me, was sitting behind the bushes just nearby where I was standing. Out of curiosity, I asked the girl if she needed any kind of help, and then she gently lifted her head up and said in a low voice, "Thank you for your concern. Actually, I have hurt my leg while I was walking by the side. Could you please give me your handkerchief so that I can clean the wound?" I said, "Okay, but please tell me if you've told your family about this," to which she said, "Yes, I've contacted them and they'll be getting here any moment. But the wound is really hurting and I need to cover it as soon as possible." So I searched my bag, and as soon as I was about to give her my handkerchief, an old man came towards me, grabbed my arm, and immediately took me to the other side and said, "Hey kid, I was watching you for a few minutes. Who are you talking to over there?" Then I replied, "I was speaking to that girl over there to ask if she needed my help and was about to give her my hanky, but you grabbed my hand." And the next thing the man said to me left me in complete silence and with a deep horror inside of me. "Listen, the girl which you are referring to was nowhere there. And I guess it was not a human, but the ghost of the girl who died 26 years ago in a road accident here. And it's good that you haven't given any of your belongings to her, because if you had, it would be a really big problem for you, like you can't even imagine. Now don't stop anywhere until you reach home." I was left shaken and out of my senses. I ran straight home as fast as I could. When I reached home, my mother opened the door and said, "Cushy, who's this girl with you? One of your friends?" Without even listening to what she said next, I came in and closed the door and went straight to my room. That night I couldn't sleep, so I tried to calm myself down. I fell asleep and ultimately woke up the next morning. I then realized I was lucky enough that I didn't give this girl my handkerchief, because if I had done so, she probably would have chased me. And the girl that accompanied me the previous night was the same girl I had encountered. I am really thankful to the old man for saving my life.
My nickname is S. I wanted to share my experience that I had 4 months ago in hopes of it getting animated. Your animations are totally great, and I'm a daily viewer of your channel. About 4 months ago, I was home as usual with my parents and siblings, and I was studying. I decided to take a shower after I was done, and so I did. When I was in the shower, my parents and my 2 siblings went to take our cat to the vet and forgot to tell me. I continued showering and didn't hear them leaving or anything, so I didn't know that they left. While I was in the shower, our power went out. I thought nothing of it since a week ago my mom said that there was a problem with the electricity and that she would get it fixed soon. I got out of the shower and went to the living room where me and my parents usually hang out and watch TV. I couldn't see much, but I clearly saw 4 figures sitting on the couch. I was talking to them and complaining about the electricity, and no one responded. I was hearing breathing sounds, so I was certain that they were actually there. I told my sister to get off the couch so I could sit, and still no answer. I got annoyed at how they were acting and decided to move her myself. But as soon as I touched that figure, it was air. I stopped for a second. I was shocked. I ran and got my phone and turned the flashlight on and saw that no one was home. I called my parents and they said they would be coming back home soon. That night when I went to my room, I saw my blanket on my bed had the shape of a human, as if someone was hiding under the blanket. I told my sister to stop playing and get out, but no answer. I got mad, and when I removed the blanket, no one was there. I kept trying to remake that shape, but the blanket was too soft to make that shape and stand like that. I'm still unsure who, or should I say what, those things were that night. And to this day, I can't find an explanation. A few days ago, somewhere in the house, I started to hear a faint scratching noise on the wall. As my house was in a remote forest, I searched the whole house to see if it was the sound of a wild animal, but I couldn't find a trace of an animal anywhere. And the sound was getting louder day by day. I was able to locate the source of the sound in 4 days, when, as usual, I was focusing on carpentry in the yard. Suddenly, the saw I was using broke apart, and so I headed to the basement, where I hadn't been for a long time, to get a spare saw. In the basement, I was rummaging through my dusty toolbox, shining my flashlight, and I heard the sound that had been bothering me for days, right behind me. I was so surprised that my whole body stiffened, and I quickly turned around to shine the flashlight towards where the sound was coming from. But nothing was there. I went up to the wall and listened with my ear against it, and to my surprise, The sound was coming from the wall at a very close distance. It was like the sound of something scratching the wall with a sharp tool, but it didn't sound like a wild animal, as it came in regular intervals. This situation, in which I had no idea what was behind the concrete wall, was so creepy and frightening that I couldn't stay home. So I quickly packed my stuff and got out and called the police. I hear a scratching noise in the walls of the basement storage room. Something is about to break out from the wall. And the police said that it's probably a wild animal, and they said they couldn't respond if it was just noise. I had no choice but to leave the forest and spend the night at the nearest motel. The next day, I returned home, grudgingly, with fear. When I returned to the house after just one day, it was a mess, as if someone had broken in. The kitchen and the living room were all covered with mud, and the refrigerator was wide open, and all the food inside was gone. There were numerous footprints on the floor, which continued on to the basement. I took my gun out and carefully went down to the basement. To my surprise, there was a huge hole in the basement wall, and when I shined the flashlight at it, I couldn't see how deep it was. I called the police right away. After a while, they arrived and started searching the house. Many fingerprints were found in the house, but what was surprising was that all the fingerprints hadn't been registered, so even after checking, they couldn't be identified. One police officer said,
It's estimated that there have been a total of 8 intruders, but even if we tracked all the fingerprints, they haven't been registered. Besides, the shape of the fingerprints are quite unique.
Then the officer looked through the hole in the basement with a flashlight and said,
The depth of this hole cannot be measured at all, and it's too dangerous for a person to go inside for an investigation. We've never experienced this kind of situation before. It will take a bit to organize a search party. How about moving out first?
Having worked as a carpenter, cutting the trees in the forest all my life, I had nowhere to go other than this place. I was afraid, but I had no choice but to plug the hole and decided to continue living there. After the cops had gone, I was left alone in the house. I covered the hole with a wooden board, nailed it firmly, and locked the basement door. Who the hell were the 8 people who broke into my house that day? The house became silent as if nothing had happened, and no more sound was heard from the walls. For several days after that, I was startled even when I heard the slightest sound. But as time passed, the memories of the incident faded. A month later, when I returned home after going out to the woods to cut trees, I heard a strange noise from the basement. That sound was a sound I've never heard before, and it sounded like a snake. I pulled out my gun and carefully opened the basement door, when something suddenly came out and pounced on me, strangling me. It was a creepy creature with a bald head and skin transparent enough to show all of its blood vessels. Its appearance was similar to that of a human. The creature was strangling and looking down at me, and it had a terrible appearance with no black parts of the eyes. It wasn't long before several creatures began to surround me when I passed out. How long has it been? When I woke up from the pain of my back being chafed, I saw the creatures grabbing my legs and dragging me into the subterranean ground. They were making an eerie hissing sound, and their transparent bodies were glowing green in the dark. The narrow passage in the underground gradually widened large enough for an adult to stand up and walk. There were many creatures gathered together. They crawled towards me and started fondling me. The creatures lifted me up and went deeper into the tunnel, where I saw a creature sitting with its head hanging low. I noticed it was the frailest creature, even at a glance, with a wrinkled body and bent back. The creature slowly lifted its head and looked at me, and its eyes resembled human eyes because it had blurry black irises. It was the only creature among the creatures to have black irises. Its eyes widened as it saw me, and it made strange noises. It began to speak in a strange language that I couldn't understand. Nana luga ani, yonamu, luga uri, kimaki, ia ani munadu. What did you say? When I asked it, the creature started muttering incomprehensible words again, and the other creatures were watching us, holding their breath. I wondered if the language really even existed, so I took my phone out of my trouser pocket and turned on the voice translation app. But the translator didn't recognize the creature's words at all. So I turned on the recorder instead and recorded the creature's words. The creature, which was muttering unknown words, eventually made a hiss sound to the rest of the creatures. Then the creatures rushed to me and began to kneel down and bow. What is this? I was puzzled at this strange situation, and they brought a bunch of various insects, dead moles, and tree roots and handed them to me. It seemed like they were sharing their food. It was only then that I realized that the creatures had no intention to kill me, and I gestured to them that I would not eat the food they brought me. Then, as if the creatures understood my words, they backed away for a while, and then brought a creature that looked like a female and thrust her on me. The female creature hissed and clung to my body. I shook it off in astonishment. I was so scared to be in this situation, and I wanted to get out quickly. So I cried and begged them to let me go back home. Then they began to lead me back down the tunnel where we came in. Walking through the long tunnel, relying on the green light emitted by the creatures in the pitch darkness, was very arduous. After many twists and turns, I was able to get out again through the hole in the basement of my house. They sent the female creature out of the hole as well, and the female creature hissed and crawled around quickly inside the basement. I jumped out of the basement and quickly locked the door. Then the female creature started pounding hard on the door from inside. I called the police and explained the situation, and shortly after, the police and the search party arrived. The police carefully opened the basement door, and at that moment, the creature jumped out and clung to me. I was so startled that I screamed, and when the police tried to remove the creature clung to me harder and bit my neck. As I screamed, holding my neck, the cops smashed the creature's head hard with a club and got it off of me. As soon as they dragged the creature out of the house, white smoke suddenly billowed from its transparent skin when it received sunlight. Soon, it burned black and died painfully on the spot. From that day on, I was investigated for a long period of time about what I had seen underground, and my house was frequented by many people involved. My house was surrounded by a police line. The corpse of the dead creature was autopsied, and it had organs resembling those of a human inside its translucent skin, but no lungs, and gill-like holes were pierced diagonally along the ribs. Experts speculated that they may have survived by breathing through the gills underground. In addition, they said that their eyesight was deteriorating, so they did not have irises and could barely identify objects by light. I submitted the file containing the voice of the creature recorded on my cell phone to the police, and numerous historians gathered to analyze the language. Surprisingly, it was not the language of the modern society, but the language of ancient North American Native Americans. And when translated, it meant, "You are our first ancestor. We hid into the ground to outlive the war and survived, generation after generation, for a very long time. If I die, there will be no one who has learned the language. Teach your language to these people." The creatures were natives who hid underground to escape from an unknown war about 3,000 years ago. Over that long period of time, their bodies had developed to suit the underground environment, and they've become creatures. If people found out of their existence, it could cause social ramifications, so the government strictly controlled them from appearing in the media. I also had to write a memorandum to not disclose all the facts. My wounds from the creature's bites have almost healed, as they were stitched up at the hospital and treated regularly, and the nightmare-like memories of the day gradually faded off as well. Whew. I looked at my neck in the mirror and sighed in relief. I took off my clothes to take a shower, and there were strange holes in my ribs. What the? Astonished, I got closer to the mirror, and surprisingly, the skin of some parts of my body had turned transparent, revealing blue blood vessels. I went straight to the hospital, and all the doctors in the hospital rushed over to see my body, and they were shocked. They said that the disease is a rare one that they have never seen before. That was when I realized that my body was slowly changing into a creature after I was bitten. After returning home, I hid in agony due to my appearance that was changing terribly. After a long time, I mustered up the courage to stand in front of the mirror and found that the black irises in my eyes had faded. In addition, as my skin had turned transparent, it felt unbearably prickly and painful when exposed to ultraviolet rays. Now my body could no longer cut trees or go outside to the yard to do carpentry. By intuition, I realized I could only survive by going into the hole in the basement. I broke through the sealed basement door and began drilling the hole the police had filled with concrete. After drilling through the concrete continuously for a week, I heard sounds of people outside the basement when I was finally able to squeeze my body into the hole.
Mr. Graham, it's the police. Please open the door. I came after receiving your medical records from the hospital. I heard your body is gradually changing. Are you all right?
I crawled into the hole, ignoring the cops shouting.
At the age of 13, I wanted to become a successful supermodel like Kendall or Bella. It was a career that stood out the most to me, and I was extremely dedicated to achieving it. I talked to my parents about my future success plan. They supported me and had amazing feedback. I was eager to become a model, so I did something dumb and decided to apply myself to a modeling company. A week later, I received a call from a woman. I specifically remember what she said to me. "Hey, are you Sarah?" "My name is Saida." I correct her by saying, "It's Saida, who is this?" She goes, "I wanted to contact you about the email I sent you. We're here to schedule a photo shoot." In surprise, I responded, "Oh really, ma'am, thank you so much." The lady replied, "Yes, honey, believe it. I've helped girls become very successful. We are located in Manhattan. Where I live, New York is close but expensive." She claimed, "I'm sure your mom would understand that this is a wonderful opportunity." I was worried about how my parents would react, but excited. The next day, I brought it up to my dad, and he said, "Saida, who was this person? Did you reveal your personal information to a stranger? You can't do that. You're going to get hurt," he screamed at the top of his lungs. Later, apologized for yelling and stating, "I just don't want you getting hurt." I had made a dumb decision. I was naive, impulsive, and impatient. That same month, I watched a video on this lady's website. It was about a young woman named Kara Nichols. She was 18 and had a passion for modeling, and later joined some random Craigslist modeling app. A supposed photographer sent her an email wanting to meet up. The photos taken of Kara are the only evidence she was seen alive. Her family is still grieving. This lady has been missing since 2012. Later, I found out the modeling company I applied to wasn't legit and was a scam. I also clearly remember the woman replying with, "To this day, it still sends shivers down my spine. Well, we're not an agency. We just pick out girls we think are a fit for us. So we just want you." At first, I thought that was a little suspicious. Thank God my parents didn't let me go.
One night while I was sleeping, I suddenly woke up with goosebumps. Looking around, there was something gigantic outside the window, blocking the moonlight. I was startled and looked at it closely. Outside the window, a very large face was staring at me. It was 3 times the size of a human's face, and its skin color was pitch black, and it was smiling broadly. I jumped out of bed in surprise. What was even more shocking was that I was on the 2nd floor. A human couldn't be that big. I shouted as I trembled, "The police!" I couldn't say a thing. After a while, it slowly moved away. It was smiling and staring at me as it walked away. Its eyes paralyzed my whole body, and I couldn't move. When it was far away, I finally could see its body. It was a huge giant that looked as if it was 12 feet tall. The length of its legs looked like a telephone pole. I froze on the spot, watching the scene. What the hell was that? Is this a dream? But despite how many times I pinched on my trembling thighs, I realized it wasn't a dream. Who the hell was he? I had big doubts. And I went around asking people in the neighborhood if anyone had seen him. Among them, there was an old lady who was over 80 years old. And she said to me with a very surprised expression,
"He's back? I'd seen him when I was about 30. After the giant came, people in the village started to die.
When I was little, my parents told me that there is a giant that appears in town, but I didn't believe it. But he appeared again. Soon, there'll be successive deaths in this village.
After that day, the people really started dying in the village, but the people who died were all troublemakers. Bullies who stole other people's money, people who committed adultery, and scammers, etc. Dozens of people have died mysterious deaths with unknown causes. All of them were found overnight with their bodies compressed into tiny balls, but the police and doctors couldn't find any exact evidence why they died like that. All the people in the village were seized with great fear. Then one day, while I was sleeping again, a loud voice resonated throughout my room, as if a cave.
I come to clean up this town every 50 years. Rogue humans cause damage to humanity, so they must be periodically disposed of. Fortunately, you are not a defective product. Keep on living a life of virtue.
And at the window, the giant was smiling again. I shuddered in fear, but with the heavy thud of his footsteps, he slowly drifted away, and I haven't heard his voice since then. All the people in the village trembled in fear, but after a few days, there was no one who died. All the villagers gathered around and said he would come again later on, and that they should prepare for that. Even at this moment, I'm really afraid. Will he really appear again after 50 years? If so, should I leave this town? If I leave this place, will I be free from his judgment?
Hello, my name is Juliana. I am currently 13 years old with dark brown hair and dark brown eyes. I will admit, this isn't the scariest of stories, but it still confuses me to this day. This happened to me in mid-2017. For some context, my mom works in a job where she has to travel a lot. So, a few days before this happened, she said she had a trip and she would be gone for a few days. I was pretty sad, but I knew it was just a business trip and she would be back soon. A few days passed, and my sisters, dad, and I were just having fun. Going out, watching movies, eating snacks, the usual. Finally, the day arrived that my mom would finally be back. I was having some trouble sleeping for a few weeks, so I was lying in my bed, unable to sleep. Then, I heard the door open and heard footsteps. But this is when it got weird. It sounded like men's footsteps, and then it just stopped. I was very confused, but played it off as our neighbors. I lived in a townhouse, so it made sense in my 9-year-old head. Finally, at around 2 a.m., I heard a woman's footsteps and saw a woman on the top of the stairs. She was wearing a pencil skirt, and it looked identical to my mom. My mom's favorite type of skirt is a pencil skirt, so naturally, I thought that woman was her. I wanted to go up to her and hug her, but I had a feeling that she was exhausted, so I let her walk into the bedroom. However, about an hour later, I heard the door downstairs open, and I went downstairs and turned on the light. There was my mom. She asked me what I was doing up, and I lied to her, saying that I was waiting for her. I still think about this from time to time. Inside, I was panicking. Who or what was that lady, and why did she look like my mom? Did I miss her so much that I started hallucinating? I'm so grateful that I decided to stay in my bed and not go up to her. I still wonder what I would have seen if I had gone up to that lady.
There was a famous restaurant in our neighborhood. It was a restaurant that had amazingly delicious back ribs, and the taste was unrivaled. I was addicted to the taste and visited the restaurant every single day. Then one day, the owner of the restaurant said to me,
"Our precious regular customer has arrived. Then we should offer some precious meat. A premium quality meat, which is really hard to obtain, came in today. It's so delicious that nothing compares to it."
The owner patted my back while talking. I was a bit offended, but I just didn't make a great deal of it, because I thought I became close to him. I said I wanted to try it, so he led me inside. and there was another restaurant inside. There were several people who looked like VIPs sitting at the table. After a while, the food came out, and it was a small amount of about 4 pieces of back ribs. Then people immediately picked it up without saying anything and ate like crazy. They even licked the bones like a dog that had been starved for several days. And they had a conversation I couldn't understand.
There's a kid I want to eat these days, but how can I catch him? If I catch him, will you cook him at a low price? We could, but we'd have to hire a professional hunter to keep him out of trouble.
Then one of them looked at me and said,
Would you like to donate some bones?
I was bewildered and said,
What?
They suddenly took off their shirts and showed their backs. There were dents in their flesh, as if several back ribs were missing. I screamed in surprise, and they chuckled as they said,
Since you ate one today, you should donate one. Isn't this a world where we help one another? Ha 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 ha.
They were staring at me with creepy eyes, which gave me a bizarre vibe. I was seized with fear and left in a hurry, just saying that I've enjoyed my meal. The owner of the restaurant continued to suggest that I sign up for the VIP membership, but I refused. I didn't go to that restaurant for several days, but one day, the taste of the back ribs occurred to me, and I couldn't stand it, so I had to go there. I was eating at the restaurant, but I felt something strange, so I turned around, and behind my back, the restaurant owner was holding a knife to my back. When I asked with fright what he was doing, he said with drowsy eyes,
Give me just one.
I left the restaurant with goosebumps, and I didn't go to the restaurant since then. Then one day, I saw that the restaurant was closed when I was passing by. So I asked the owner of the store next door if something had happened, and he said,
Someone brought a knife to the store a while ago and created a disturbance, and 3 diners were rushed to the emergency room. But what was creepy was that everyone was stabbed like crazy, only in the back.
The culprit was arrested, but reportedly shouted till the end that he had asked everyone for their consent to stab them. I'm 16 years old, and I grew up in an orphanage since I was young. I've lived alone in this world, without a family, when one day I met a guy named Brian at church. He was very kind. He was in his early 20s and lived in a small house, and I got to live with him in his house. However, one day, I started to experience terrible things in that house. One day, he came back home, covered with dirt and sweat, and said, "Today I got one done in a while. Let's go eat something delicious." I thought he had come back after harsh labor, but when he opened his large bag, it was full of bloody knives, all kinds of tools, and wads of cash. When I saw his face looking at me proudly, I got goosebumps. When I asked where he got so much money, he replied, "I risked my life to work. It's hard to make money." Then he took off his shirt, and there were bruises all over his body. I couldn't understand what he was doing. He didn't tell me the details. However, he took me to the department store the next day and bought me all kinds of luxury goods, and we ate at a top-notch restaurant. I was bewildered by everything, but secretly, I enjoyed it. Then one day, Brian called me and asked me to come and pick him up. So I drove to the address he gave me, and when I arrived, there was an abandoned building, and a man was tied up inside. Brian was cutting the man's finger there, and when I arrived, he said with an innocent expression, "Isaac, in life, sometimes there are people you absolutely have to kill. In that case, you must cut their fingers and head off. That way, they won't be identified." Then he started slicing the man's neck with a saw. I heard the man scream, and suddenly my ears got clogged. My whole body trembled as I watched the whole scene, but I held on tight, trying not to be noticed by him. The guy who was so kind to me was a devil. I couldn't understand, and I realized that the money he had been spending on me was the money earned by doing this. I was in great shock. I wondered whether I should report it to the police, but I was afraid that without him, I would be left alone in this world again. Then one day, I was asleep at dawn, but I heard something hit the floor with a thud. I woke up and went to Brian's room. There were 3 men wearing sunglasses. They looked at me, put their fingers to their mouths, and said, "Shh," and then I saw it. What fell to the floor was Brian's head. I couldn't even scream. I felt paralyzed by fear from head to toe, and I couldn't breathe. There was vinyl spread on the floor, and as they put Brian's body in a bag, they said, "Good boy, I won't kill you if you keep your mouth shut, but if you tell others what you saw today, your head will be blown off. We are experts in this kind of work, so it only takes 3 minutes to get done with one person. You know what I mean? When I asked them why they killed Brian, they replied, I received a request saying that if I got done with this guy, they would give me $100,000. This job cannot last long anyway. He's been used and abandoned. They also took away the cash Brian had saved, so I was left alone in the world again. Since then, I tried to live on my own, but it wasn't easy. And suddenly, I remembered what Brian had said to me. He always had said to me, this world is a jungle. If you're not careful, you'll become someone's prey. I'd rather be a hunter. But in this world, I was like a very weak deer. I couldn't just sit there. So after reporting the people who killed Brian to the police, I ran off to another city. Later on, the police contacted me, and I was informed that the killers had been arrested. But even after that, I had to live in fear that someone might come and kill me. Fortunately, I've been doing well so far, but there still would be someone in this world murdering for money.
This true story takes place back in 2015. It was a cold, chilling winter night as usual. I'm a young mom with 2 girls under the age of 10. So naturally, I was busy making dinner for them at home. My kids were upstairs playing, and my husband at the time had left for work early in the morning and wouldn't be back until midnight. So it was a regular day. It was around 7 p.m., and as I was preparing dinner, suddenly the doorbell rang. I was all alone on the first floor of our house. The kitchen is across the hallway from the door, and as I turned to look at it, I saw the figure of a skinny, frail man wearing baggy clothes standing outside our door. Although it could have been a neighbor or delivery man, I knew by the shape of that figure that it couldn't possibly be anyone I was familiar with. I wasn't expecting a package either. The chills ran up my body as I wondered who could possibly be at my house during this time. I slowly walked to the door and tried looking out the window to see who it was. However, the window on our door was very thick and had a pattern on it, so it was impossible to determine who it could be. I walked back to the light switch a few feet from the door and turned on my hallway light, then the porch light. Rapidly, he dropped to the floor and I stood there paralyzed by fear. Now that the lights were on, I could see more clearly. The man had dropped to the floor and started hiding underneath the bench that we had on our porch. What was he trying to do? What should I do? I thought. That's when I noticed that there was not only a man at our door hiding, but there was also a getaway car in our driveway. We have a close bond with all of our neighbors, and the people in the neighborhood know each other really well. So my first instinct was to call my neighbor who lives across the street. I called and asked him to see if there was anything suspicious going on outside my door. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to gather any information from it. So I took it into my own hands and called the local police station to see if they could drive by and check the area. For 20 minutes, I stood in the hallway anxiously waiting. Then I heard movement at the front door. The car that was in my driveway had pulled out and drove to another house on my street. The man had made a run for it and dashed to the other house as well. I wasn't sure what to think after that, and I don't really know what happened. I saw the police drive by and everything was normal. All I know is that the house that the man had run to was well known for selling drugs. I assume to this day that the man had just gotten the wrong house, but I still can't shake off that scary experience. Why was he hiding in the first place? To this day, I still wonder what could have happened if I opened that door. I was a little younger than what I am today. To be exact, I'm 37 years old now. So I was around 18 at the time. To this day, I'm freaked out by it and have recurring nightmares about it. And I still feel like my life is on the line, even though nobody believes it. So this is why you should never trust what you see. I took a pet sitting job over the summer from an elderly couple. They looked around 80 years old, so I didn't think it would be sketchy or bad in any way. It was watching a cat while they left for a 3-day vacation. All they said was to feed the cat every 7 to 9 hours. It was easy money. So fast forward to the day. I go to their house. I gather all my stuff out of my car, like flashlights so I can read. Their house is kind of dark and they don't like the lights on, and some extra clothes. Once I walked in there was this musty smell. This was the first weird thing that happened. It was strange because their house looked clean and tidy, but it was so faint I brushed it off. They soon showed me around the house. It was a decently sized house with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. It had carpet as floors, and the decorations were quite modern despite the owner's age. The old woman took me aside and showed me where I'd be sleeping. It was a nice room, but the musty smell was slightly worse in this room, and the carpet looked lighter than the rest of the carpet around the house. But yet again, I brushed it off, like an idiot. And one of the more important parts of this story, they told me, was that they had a son and he lived in this house too, and his room was in the basement. They told me that he never came out of his room, and they told me that his room was off limits because he was sensitive. Anyway, 30 minutes later they leave, and this kid and I are here alone. It goes smoothly for a long time, I'd say 2 hours, until something happens. Now, I know the rule 3 red flags and then you're out. But again, I was a stupid teenager desperate for money, so I overlooked things until it was too late. I was watching TV on the bottom floor when I heard a loud slam from the basement. Now, usually I'd be scared, but I know that her son was down there, so I looked past it even though it was extremely off-putting. Well, fast forward a couple minutes later, and I hear the basement door slam open. I'm confused by this because if he supposedly lives here, why would he feel the need to slam the door? Again, I let it go because I don't know him, so I don't have the right to judge him. But because I was a very stupid teenager, I decided I would go check on him regardless of what the old lady said. So, I get up, trying not to make too much noise, and I walk to the basement door. And lo and behold, the door was wide open and the stairs leading down were completely blacked out from the absence of light. No windows, no light anywhere. So at that moment, I assumed that he had come up from the basement to get a snack, so I headed to the kitchen. But before I tell more, I didn't hear him going into the kitchen, I just assumed he did. I turned the corner and I saw him standing there. He had dark brown hair with brown eyes. He looked to be African American in his early 20s and was quite handsome, so my judgment was down quite a bit. I took a light step into the kitchen and he flipped his head around and looked at me. Nothing was too weird about this because he looked normal, other than the fact that he didn't talk or make any sound on the matter, but what did confuse me was that his hands had 2 things, a long rope and a kitchen knife, and right after he looked at me, he whispered, "Basement." I'll admit, it didn't strike me as suspicious because this was a smallish town and the year was 1990, so there weren't many defining factors to know about bad people, like stalkers or killers. And because the old people didn't strike me as the type to harbor a wanted criminal, all I did was walk away. So unlike that phrase, curiosity killed the cat, in this case, curiosity saved the cat. As I was walking past the basement, I remembered what he said, and something finally lit up inside me, telling me something was off. And it all had something to do with this basement. So I got my flashlight I thankfully brought with me and walked down the stairs. It wasn't a very big basement. It had 1 couch in the corner and a coffee table, and then the bedroom right next to it. But the defining factor was that the smell was overwhelmingly bad. It smelled like rotten eggs mixed with that musky scent throughout the house. But I bared through it because I was far too curious on what it could be, that I forgot what it couldn't be. Good. I opened the door to find a guy laying on the ground with a pool of blood surrounding him. He was wrapped head to toe in rope, and the kitchen knife was stabbed into the wall. I was horrified, and my eyes teared up from the strong fumes. There were bugs and maggots everywhere, but then I recognized something that will haunt me forever. The person I saw was the same person I had seen in the kitchen. Same shirt, same pants, same everything. I was so horrified that I stood there in a daze until a maggot jumped on me and broke me out of it. But let me tell you, I never ran out of a house faster in my life. I lived too far away to run to, so I knocked on the farthest house I could before passing out from exhaustion and told them what happened. Apparently, the elderly couple killed 3 people in the bedroom I was staying in. and that's why the carpet was lighter. They bleached the entire room. The musty smell wasn't as bad in there because they killed them hours before I got there and stuffed them in the closet. Their first victim was their son, who they tied up and killed 5 days before anything else happened. I can't explain what happened in that house, but I'm thankful that I went down there when I did. I also don't know what happened to the elderly couple, but I hope they got what they deserved.
This incident happened about 10 years ago. Back then, I got robbed of money every day by bullies in my neighborhood. They always gathered around in the alley and took money from passerbys, but I had to run into them all the time because the alley was on the way to my house. Then one day, I couldn't take it anymore and said I couldn't give them money, and they beat me up. I came home crying, and I couldn't stand the outbursts of anger and pain. I finally made up my mind to take revenge. However, it wasn't like this from the beginning. All of this was just because of a flyer I ran into on the street. There was a sentence written on it: "We take revenge for you with black magic." I called them out of curiosity and asked what this is, and they said that they offer services of punishing someone who you want to punish on behalf of you. Eventually, I went there out of curiosity and with a bit of doubt. When I arrived and opened the door, there were many large skeleton models standing there, and suddenly, the skeletons turned their heads towards me and ran up to me, creaking. I fell on my back as I was startled, but when I regained consciousness, the skeletons were not moving, but remaining still. It was as if I saw an illusion for a moment, but it really felt like it was moving. The man sitting inside said, "What you see and what you don't see, both are true. What you just saw is real." I realized that he had a spell. I ran up to him and said, "There is someone I want to punish. How can I do that?" Then he handed me a menu, saying that he wouldn't take the blame no matter what happens. I said it's okay. The paper he handed me had numerous monsters to choose from. Starting with low-class demons, there were dozens of different types of monsters of the underworld drawn on it, including a 3-headed dog and a 5-headed snake monster. Also, the cost of summoning each monster varied as well. Lastly, there even was a death god. The cost of summoning the death god was incredibly high. I asked in a trembling voice, "Can you even summon the death god?" He said, "It is possible, but of course it is up to him whether or not the death god will take him to the afterlife." I pondered long and hard, and then he said, "If you couldn't decide, experience it yourself. I'll call them here, so take a look and decide." I chose a demon that looks like a gargoyle. Then he uttered an incantation, and after a while, the room suddenly became completely dark. Then I heard a deafening voice of a monster, and in front of my eyes stood a gigantic gargoyle-like demon. It grabbed my neck and lifted me into the air, laughing. I said, groaning in pain, "How?" Then the black magician said, smiling, "I told you, it's all real." After a while, the gargoyle disappeared like smoke, and I fell to the floor. I signed a contract with him right away, and he said he would summon the demon when I want to. A few days later, I saw the gangsters gathered around in the alley again, and I secretly hid behind them and called the black magician. He chanted a spell, and after a while, the alley became very dark. Then the bullies started screaming. Looking closely, the gargoyle had grabbed them by the neck and was throwing them frantically to the ground. As they tried to escape, crawling away in panic, they were trampled by the gargoyle, and their bodies were crushed. Screams and moans, begging for help, filled the alley. It was hard to believe what I was seeing. Moments later, people passing by called the police after hearing them scream, and when the police arrived, all of the bullies were sprawled out on the floor, gasping for breath. The police speculated that they had fought with each other. The bullies said that they were attacked by a monster, but the police didn't believe them. They were all taken by ambulance, and after that, I heard that all those bullies had broken bones and ruptured organs, so they underwent surgery. They were also receiving psychiatric treatment because they kept claiming that they saw monsters. They didn't show up in the alley anymore after that, and I didn't run into them anymore. I was really surprised that the black magic had been a success, and on the other hand, it was secretly delightful. But what's even more exciting is that no one knows I did that.
One day my friend Justin showed me his cell phone and said, "Aiden, look at this. This is a new mobile game application called Zombie Hunting, and it's something like Pokemon Go. When you turn on the camera, you can see zombies, and you can hunt them with weapons designated for each zombie." Wow, that's so cool. As Justin turned his cell phone camera toward the wall, 2 zombies that were wandering around appeared. One of the zombies then turned his head toward our direction and flung himself at us. When Justin quickly chose an axe as a weapon and struck the zombie's head, the zombie collapsed, and a message popped up, notifying a successful hunt. "A gun for the next one." As Justin touched the weapon storage, various weapons including pistols, machine guns, knives, hammers, and more appeared, and Justin changed his weapon to a pistol and shot it wildly at the zombie. The zombie died on the spot, splashing blood, and cheerful music played as a message popped up, notifying a successful hunt. Wow, is the game over since both of them are dead? No, this game doesn't end. If you look at the map here, it shows you the place where lots of zombies are gathered, and if you go there in person, you'll be able to find them. I want to try too. Search Zombie Hunting in the App Store. It's free and it's really fun. I downloaded it right away and lost myself in the game from that day on. The zombie game, with its high-quality graphics and sound, quickly became very popular. It seemed even funny how people were stampeding with their phones, looking for spots where zombies were gathered. However, as the number of players increased, the number of zombies went down rapidly, and everyone became eager to find zombies that had now become so rare. One day, a pop-up appeared on the main screen of the zombie game. Recruiting participants for the Zombie Hunting Festival. What is this? Reading into the content, I found that it was about inviting 50 participants to a spot where 2,000 zombies were released. It was said to take place in a mysterious place, and they even provided a bus to take people there. I was so curious and eager to go to the festival. Participants were selected through a lottery if they applied with their name, address, a photo of their face, and which weapon they would like to use if they were to participate in the festival. I took a picture of myself right away, wrote down the information, and sent it. At that moment, I got a call from Justin. "Aiden, did you see that they were recruiting participants for the Zombie Hunting Festival?" "Yeah, I just signed up." "Me too. I hope we both get to go." 1 week later, Justin and I heard the miraculous news that we had both been invited. And in a few days, we would receive our invitations and a nice bulletproof vest with Zombie Hunting written on it. When I opened the invitation, it said, "Welcome to the Zombie Hunting Festival. All participants must wear the bulletproof vest uniforms included in order to participate." I was more than delighted, feeling like a special agent hunting zombies. A few days later, the day had finally arrived, and Justin and I arrived at the designated place wearing our bulletproof vests and with our hearts racing with excitement. Soon after, a large black bus with Zombie Hunting Festival written in red letters on the windshield stopped in front of us. The bus door opened, and a short-haired woman came out and gestured for us to ride the bus. As we hurried onto the bus, we found it already full of people, all wearing vests. The bus departed, and we traveled for a long time to finally reach a remote forest. It was a wide field surrounded by lush forests. When I looked around the surroundings with my camera, a huge number of zombies were roaming in the field, and participants murmured, unable to hide their excitement.
Now, shall we get off the bus and start the game after hearing a brief explanation?
The short-haired woman led people when we arrived at the destination. As people who had gotten off the bus gathered around her in a circle, she began explaining the game.
Welcome to the Zombie Hunting Festival. Would you all open the application?
When we all took our phones out and opened the application, a pop-up appeared with the phrase, "VIP Human Zombie Hunting. You are now the zombie," written on it. "What does this mean?" the crowd buzzed. The woman then said,
Do you remember that you wrote down a weapon of your choice when you signed up? The weapon that you choose will now be a designated weapon to kill you. Here, you are the zombies.
"What are you talking about, bitch?" One of the participants cursed at her, but she continued her talk regardless.
The bulletproof vests that you are wearing are designed to explode the moment you take it off. The vests are equipped with a GPS function, so the gamers are able to check your locations with their smartphones in real time. If you take off your vest to escape the chase, boom, you will be shattered in pieces. And unfortunately, this vest does not have a bulletproof function.
Bullshit! You're not really gonna kill us, right? Despite his question, the woman continued talking.
High-tension currents are flowing through the 7-meter-high fences surrounding this place. So the moment you try and climb it, you will be killed by an electric shock. You may not take off your vests, climb up the fences, and the only way you can survive here is to dodge the attacks of gamers. I know it's a difficult situation, but I hope you can survive. Good luck!
The woman stepped on the bus as she finished talking, and it quickly vanished from our sight. At that moment, a sudden loud noise of a gun was heard, and a man fell down. The people simultaneously looked at him, only to see that his face had disappeared because his head had burst. "Headshot!" said a man with a shotgun, smiling, standing in the middle of armed people in white masks walking in this direction. People who had seen the grotesque scene all began to scatter and run away at full speed, and Justin and I ran into the bushes together. Some time had passed since we began running when the sound of guns finally came to a halt, and we hid behind a large rock. Justin said in a tearful voice, "What's going on?" "I don't know." Then Justin found a piece of paper on the ground. It was a catalog with game instructions written on it. And what was written on it was just horrifying. VIP Human Zombie Hunting Festival. Total prize money of $6 million. Open the application and scan the zombie's face with the camera. You can only earn points by killing them with a designated weapon. We will be in charge of cleaning up the mess, so don't worry and kill as much as you want. Justin, after looking at the catalog, said, "VIP Human Zombie Hunting? I've seen this game. It was made by the same company, but this one was a paid game. And I thought it was a scam because the subscription fee was $20,000. No way! Have we become zombies in this game?" I felt chills running down my body as I listened to Justin. "I think so. I guess they lured us all the way here by introducing it as a festival to use us as zombies," Justin replied in a trembling voice. "Let's call the police." I urgently took out my phone only to find that everything else had gone dead except the zombie game app. "My cell phone must be broken. Try yours." However, Justin's phone was also frozen in the same way. "Both of our cell phones are dead? What's wrong with them? Maybe they planted viruses in the application. It doesn't make sense that they're both broken." Then Justin flopped and said, "Aiden, which weapon did you choose?" "An axe. What about you?" "A machine gun." Then, all of a sudden, 2 white-masked men appeared as they scampered through the bush, and Justin and I lowered our bodies and hid behind the rock. "Turn on the map. We have 2 here." They went up to the rock where we were hiding and shoved their phones in our faces as soon as they found us. As Justin's face was recognized, information about him floated over his head. "Wow, a machine gun for him." They simultaneously took out the machine guns that they were carrying on their shoulders and began shooting at Justin. In an instant, Justin fell down, riddled with bullets. When Justin died, they shoved their phones at me. "What? An axe for him? Did you bring the axe?"
My name is Kale, and this is based on my real-life experience. I work as a businessman in Morocco and got sent on a business trip to Nigeria on the 26th of January, 2022. I wasn't really interested in traveling again, but I had to, so I packed my bags and made my way to the airport. I landed safely in Nigeria and got escorted to a luxurious hotel room, where I was informed about how safe the hotel was and how I had nothing to worry about. Being uninterested in their banter, all that was on my mind was, get done with the business deal and leave. The next day, I woke up and made my way to the company to get done with the meeting. and signed the contract. The whole day went slow as hell, but I was glad that it was finally over. Making my way to my room, which was on the ground floor, I swiped my card onto the lock and walked in, locking the door behind me. I decided to freshen up as I had already had my dinner before making my way back to the room. As soon as I was done, I packed my stuff for my departure the next day and headed straight to bed by 11 p.m. The clock struck 3 a.m. on the 28th of January. At that hour, I woke up and decided to use the restroom. When I was done, I made my way to the dispenser to get myself some water to drink. As I was about to take a sip, my eyes made contact with the window, the curtain slightly pushed aside. I could see a girl in a gown, around the age of 6, standing next to the tree, not too far from my window. She just stood there, staring at me. I sighed and looked at the time, which read 3:10 a.m. I shouted out to her saying, "Hey kid, it's dangerous to be out there alone. Return back to your room." I turned around unbothered, but the atmosphere didn't feel right. I turned to look out the window again, but this time, it was no longer the girl, but a little boy, who stood there, staring right back at me. "What the?" I cursed as I shouted again, while gripping the window pane. "It's too late to be out on pranks, kids! Get back to your rooms!" In anger, I turned around to leave, but then I remembered I left the window open, and when I turned to close it, my eyes widened as I released a gasp. The hairs on my skin rose at what I saw. This time, it was a dog. It didn't feel normal to me. All it did was stand in the same spot while staring right into my room. In fear, I slammed the window shut, locked it, and ran back to my bed, covering myself with my blanket, shaking with fear. I tried controlling my breath, but I passed out from fear. I woke up at 8 a.m. in the morning and got dressed as my flight is to take off by 10:30 a.m. As I walked towards the door, I noticed something, which made me remember everything. It all turned out to be a dream. But one thing I couldn't get over was that the door was unlocked and slightly ajar. My heart raced in fear. I checked all my belongings and noticed that nothing was missing. I remember locking my door before heading to bed. But what happened? The security checked all the CCTV cameras, but found nothing. At this point, I wasn't interested in staying at the hotel any longer. I thanked the receptionist, and I left for my flight. I arrived in Morocco safely, and not a day passes that I do not think about what happened in Nigeria. What exactly happened at the luxurious hotel in Abuja?
Hi. To start off, I'm a pretty short girl with brown hair, and my roommate is pretty tall with blonde hair. This story happened a year ago. I had just moved to Canada for my film studies and had found a student residence where I had met my now best friend, that I'll call Christina for the story, and 2 other roommates. Christina and I really liked going out when we were bored or tired of staying in. So most of the time, we'd go out at night since that was when we were mostly bored. One night around 3 a.m., we decided to go out for a walk downtown and decided to go to Chinatown. The streets were pretty empty apart from a couple people that were mostly going home after a long shift. The streets were glowing with all the lanterns and a couple shops that were closing at the time. At the time, I had a pack of cigarettes in my bag since I had a movie where I needed cigarettes as props. As we were walking down the street, we noticed a weird man, bald in his late 30s, standing ahead of us, right at the end of a dark alley. He approached us and asked us if we by chance had a lighter. I told him we didn't, but it did bring back to mind that pack of cigarettes that I had. So I offered him the pack since I'm not a smoker and wasn't going to use them anyway. He smiled and thanked us as we started to make our way down the road. After a couple minutes, I felt uneasy and peeked behind me to see the man staring at us from afar, but brushed it off. After a while, Christina tapped me on the shoulder, telling me to look behind me in a subtle way. I turned around to see the same man 20 feet away from us, walking slowly in the same direction. Christina and I noticed a bubble tea store ahead that was still open, but was about to close. The bubble tea store had a big glass window where you could see the streets. We went in to get a drink, and while waiting, the weird encounter wasn't on our mind anymore. 10 minutes later, I was looking out the window when the man suddenly walked in front of the window and stopped, staring right at us. He placed both hands against the window, looking at us with wide eyes. He then decides to come in and looks at the cashier and asks her, "So what is this?" The cashier said, "It's a bubble tea store, but we're closed now." He stood there staring at her without saying anything. The cashier said, "We're not taking any orders, we're closed." Me, Christina, and the cashier all looked at each other, sensing something was off. He then turns to me and says, "See you momentarily," with the creepiest smile I've ever seen before heading out. We all stood there frozen, not knowing what to do, so we decided to wait it out a bit. 5 minutes later, we saw him peeking through the window, waiting to see when we were going to go out, and hid back to the side. Christina and I decided to go to the cashier and ask her if she had a back door we could leave from. She said yes and led us to the back door that led to a dark alley. Our only way home was through the front street where the man was. We started making our way through very slowly until we made it to the same road, but a little further than where the bubble tea store was. Once there, we ran as fast as we could to the nearest place we could hide. I peeked over my shoulder to see him sprinting towards us. After a while of running, we lost him at a karaoke bar that was still open, where we decided to stay a couple hours before heading home to make sure he wouldn't be there anymore. But it kept me thinking, what would have happened if we would have left through the front door? Hello, my name is Rose. I have an older brother named Adam who is also my best friend. We have both parents. Our father loves us a lot, but our mother hates Adam because of an unknown reason. Everything was great until a horrible situation happened. So I woke up one day and saw my father crying and my mother who tried to comfort him. I was little at that time, so I didn't really know what was going on, so I asked my parents if there was something wrong. My father started mumbling, Your brother, he went missing." My father started to cry even more. I was in shock. I can't believe that my only brother, my only friend, disappeared. But how? Nobody knew, and the police, after investigating for a couple weeks, closed the case. We were all sad and couldn't even imagine something like this happening to our family. But one night, I was laying in my bed, half awake. Then I heard a weird noise in my room. It was dark, so I couldn't see anything, but it sounded like somebody was running. I was frozen when the thing who was running stood in front of me. I was in pure shock. It was Adam? How is it possible? Adam just started giggling and said, "Pranked ya." I couldn't believe what just happened. I even said, "It wasn't funny. We were all worried about you." Adam still laughed. After a couple minutes, Adam stopped laughing and he said, "Let's go play in our parents' room." I didn't understand what was wrong with him. First he came out of nowhere and started laughing when I said we were worried about him, and now he wants to play in our parents' room? But I did miss him a lot, so I agreed, and maybe I could have told my parents about the situation. When we ran into our parents' room and jumped on their bed and started yelling, "Look, Daddy, Mommy, Adam is back." I even pointed at him. My father was confused. He said he saw nobody there. I started to cry and tried to tell him that Adam was there. But Father just thought I missed him a lot, so I even started imagining him, so he hugged me and told me some sweet words. But my mother could see Adam, and she was very scared. Adam didn't look normal at all now. He had a huge black grin on his face and red eyes with big black pupils. And he was sitting at the exact spot and exact time my mother killed him.